necessarily me or my family. There's a lot of other people that are working really hard. So thank you, everybody who was there. You can watch it online if you want. We posted it up so that people could see what we're doing. And look, it's going to be a challenge. We're not going to be able to do everything we want to do. We're not going to meet everybody's needs, but we're going to do our best. We're trying to do our best. And again, I say we, I really do mean not the royal we. I mean a lot of other really great people. And Judith knows about it. Judith's been following it, and Judith's on the phone right now trying to get her dad, I think, on the line. We're going to have her, what? She's not, she's on mute. But anyways, I'm stalling for a little bit because I know she's going to bring on her dad.
Rabbi Mark, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so Shabbat is the holiest day of the year.
Yep.
Correct. Okay. Rosh Hashanah falls on Friday night.
Yep.
Why are we doing the challah traditional for Rosh Hashanah instead of the traditional challah that would be traditional for Shabbat? Well, I asked that really screwy, but you know what I mean.
No, I know what you mean. So why does a round challah take precedence over a non-round?
Right.
So it's an interesting question. Look, both of those types of challah, both challahs, as I kind of mentioned, I didn't talk about the round challah, but the braided challah, the whole concept of that isn't a requirement. Those are customs that are, that developed. And as I mentioned with the braided challah, just to summarize, it was based on a superstition that again, keeping demons out of food was super important when people didn't know about bacteria and other kinds of things. Though I will say hand washing was also required. So even though they didn't know about bacteria, we have for thousands of years figured out ways to keep ourselves healthy. But there was this feeling like, people still got sick from food a lot. Let's figure out ways. And so braiding was a way to cut down on demons entering your food. They'd get confused and they wouldn't enter the food. But back to the bigger question. So the other issue of customs, because it's not just about challah. Normally when a holiday falls on Shabbat, we do the extra Shabbat blessings, we'll do Vishamru or Lechadodi, whatever the prayer we would do for Friday night or Saturday. We'll do those prayers in addition. But so Shabbat takes precedence to some extent in that it's traditions. We'll do seven. We'll break up the Torah reading into seven readings plus a maftir instead of, for example, on a Rosh Hashanah day, we do 5, or on Yom Kippur we do 6 readings plus the maftir. So the Shabbat ritual kind of does, in a sense, take precedence. But when it comes to the custom, I think one of the things that we kind of think about is if we have a custom for a holiday, and even if we have a custom on Shabbat, that custom either it gets blended or we keep the holiday one there. I mean, nobody says you can't do another kind of challah, one of each or not to do the challah, but because there's no religious requirement for a challah to be in any kind of shape, people kind of just, there's nothing to do. You have to do it for the holiday. And so the holiday custom in that sense takes precedence. I will tell you, since you asked it, Sandy, it actually now leads to a bigger issue, which is one that I'm really debating over and trying to figure out what to do. Because this one's really, not that the challah is not important. The challah is important. We love challah. But there's actually a really, really, really important issue this high holidays in this year because of Shabbat being
right, and he will
anybody want to tell me what that problem is halachically? And this is a halachic issue, a big one. Anybody want to hit me with the big one? Well, first of all, there are prayers. We don't normally do Avinu Malkeinu, for example, on a Saturday. If, again, the holiday falls on Shabbat, the Shabbat precedence of not doing Avinu Malkeinu that day means that we don't do Avinu Malkeinu on Rosh Hashanah, the first day. No, there's a bigger issue. We're not supposed to blow shofar, right? Shofar traditionally was not blown on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which is one of the reasons why having 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, which we've always done at Beth Ami, and we will do this year, allowed for the fact that the first day of Rosh Hashanah can follow on Shabbat, second day can't, and
figure out what's wrong with
Having
this.
that second day allows you to hear the sound of the shofar if you didn't hear it the first day, right? Now, here's the problem. Oh, there he is. Judith is on. Your dad is now here. And let me answer this big question. What do we do this year? So now we know that when we do a Rosh Hashanah on the second day, we will lose, we will mute. I'm just muting everybody for a quick second. Somebody's phone is on. We will, we don't blow the shofar traditionally at Beth Ami if Rosh Hashanah falls on the first day on Shabbat. Hasn't happened a lot, but it's happened 2 times, I think, since I've been at the temple, and we haven't blown the shofar. But here's the issue. We're already, to some extent, not following halakha by having services online or on television or on a computer or anything else. So the question of what are we violating, what rule are we violating by hearing the shofar? What we're really violating, or what rule we're breaking, if you will, is that you're not supposed to blow shofar, or hear shofar, I should say, on Shabbat. But the question really is it blowing the shofar or is it hearing the shofar? And carrying the shofar and doing the work of shofar blowing. But to me, the bigger issue here is the tradition is not to blow the shofar on Shabbat, or listen to the shofar, or however you want to say it, not to have a shofar. So there's a real question about it. And since everything, like that is going to be pre-recorded anyways, there's a question of what to do. So that being said, what I'm thinking of doing for the temple, for our service, is having it available, and if somebody wants to hear it on Shabbat, that they can hear it. Because the reality is that anybody can hear the sound of the shofar if they want on any day, because doing the same thing that they're doing with us, they can play it off the computer or see a video of somebody blowing the shofar. That if we allow somebody to hear the shofar on their own, we're not really violating anything by saying, here's a shofar sound. You can watch it today. You can watch it tomorrow. You can watch it next week. You can watch it anytime during the, during the month that you want to hear it. And technically speaking, we are going to, we're going to start hearing the sound of the shofar from Friday morning, the beginning of Elul. That's Rosh Chodesh. You can hear the sound of or people hear the sound of the shofar throughout that whole month. So for 40 days, with the exception of blowing it on Shabbat, you can hear the shofar. So this is an interesting question of religious law and, how we follow it in the midst of this pandemic. So I was having a discussion about it this morning already, what we're going to do with the shofar. So again, my best guess is that we're going to offer it. It'll be up there as a block. The same as we're probably, by the way, going to offer up the Torah reading, which again, we're hoping that Judith will be a part of, as she has been for so many years. We'll offer up the Torah reading as a block that somebody can watch on the high holidays. And so, we'll put together different blocks, and then people will be able to see what they want. So the blocks will be, an hour. Maybe the shofar sounding will probably be closer to like a half hour. But the reason we're going to do that is otherwise we're going to have a 3-hour service, which based on what everybody's doing is not what anybody's doing. There is not going to be a half hour, there's not going to be a 3-hour service you're going to find from start to finish in many synagogues that are doing, which is most synagogues, doing something virtual. So very few of them are just going to throw up a 3-hour service and say, here's our 3-hour service, have fun. Most people are being told that no one's going to watch a 3-hour service on their phone or computer or even on their YouTube on their television. So that is some insight of what's going on right now in the dialogue. Most synagogues including most conservative synagogues, folks, because I was talking to one yesterday, are planning on services that will run somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half. Now, ours are kind of usually almost as long as a conservative service. Would usually clock in at about 3 to 3. Well, I'm not going to fool anybody. It's not 3 hours. It's 3.5 hours. But maybe the conservative service would have been 4 hours or 4.5 hours. So we're a little shorter of that, but not a lot. We've never run multiple services where we have to have an hour and an hour and a half service. Some synagogues were talking about doing that if they were doing them live virtually. Again, these are all discussions that I'm having with other people. I'm having them with regarding what JLTV is going to broadcast, because obviously what we do will also be broadcast on JLTV. All of these things are in discussion right now amongst the Jewish throughout the Jewish world right now. And just so you know, as lay people and as participants in the high holiday worship, I will tell you that there are a lot of people around the country that are working really, really hard right now to deliver high holiday programming like never before. I mean, you've got people across the country, in every part of the country, that are trying to come up with really good high holiday programming, and we're going to work together. We're collaborating like we never have before. We are sharing best practices and trying to figure out immediately after this call, after our class right now, we will go to a discussion that I'm having with members of our board on how we're going to also structure this. So there's a lot of work going into it, not just with us.
Mark?
Across the country. Yes.
Will you be, I love the idea of having the little blocks. Will you be hosting like on a Facebook or something where you go through all of them in order if people want to participate in that way?
So what we'll do is we'll probably, again, what will be the binding glue behind it is a live YouTube and Facebook feed that will kind of link everything together so that when people want to watch it, they could technically watch it live, or they could watch it an hour later if they wanted. So if we start, I'm assuming again we're starting at about 9 o'clock. If they want to start watching it at 10 o'clock and watch all or 12 o'clock in the afternoon, bless you, they'll watch it all the way through, or they can just pick out those blocks that they want to watch. So that is definitely on the agenda. The other thing that I will tell you that we are going to do live in a Zoom type fashion, but also then have up there is the Torah discussion that we always do on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. We'll be doing that on Zoom. So that will be live, and that there is no reason why the majority of that time you can spend like this. Somebody a little noisy. That will be going on Sunday morning. We'll be having our Torah discussion on the second day. So that will be live.
Hello?
Not in person, not in the room.
Hi.
But it will be.
You need to be muted. Can you mute yourself?
I'm muted. So that will be what we do on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. But again, then you'll be able to see the shofar blowing and the other stuff that we would do on Sunday as well. So I know that's confusing, but the thing to keep in mind is that almost everything will be available in blocks that people can watch anytime they want. And the accessibility of this is really great, because obviously you can watch it in your pajamas, and you can watch it starting at 9, or you can watch it whatever time you get up that day, and whatever time and wherever you are. You can be in a park, you can be on the beach, and you can be with us and watch and be part of it. You can be in Springfield, Missouri, or the Bay Area, the peninsula, and you can be part of what we're doing live at the same time we all are. So that is the good news. The bad news is we won't be able to hug you. And as we come back to where we began, we're going to get started. And so I want to invite Judith to help us read this morning. I think we got your dad on the line from the Philadelphia area, correct?
We're trying. We think so.
Oh, he's there. I just muted it again. So I think he was there. We were getting feedback from him. So that's good. And this is awesome because this is another one of the things that, well, it's awesome when we have people of all ages who are joining us, and especially, again, people around the country. So we're so glad your dad's in good health and is able to be with us this morning. So we're going to pop up.
Can you see the beard?
No, I didn't see the video yet. But
Oh, he shut it off now.
Looks like Moses.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I was just going to say that. He looks like Moses.
It's awesome. He should live to be as old as Moses.
He's doing great. He's getting there.
So, yeah, so we'll flip back to the Torah a little bit. And again, this is, we're going to read some of the commentary on the Midrash on Joseph and Joseph and his brothers. And again, well, there's some interesting things that the rabbis say that go on in this amazing, and I got to really say it, when you read it again in the Torah, it is an amazing reveal. We love using the word reveal now, right? You know, I don't know why that word all of a sudden became such a big word, you know, the reveal. It's probably something to do with
all about the makeovers.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's got to be reality TV, right? The reveal, because all of a sudden we're all using that, well, not all of us, but it's definitely become part of the modern jargon, is the big reveal, right? And this is the biggest reveal. Joseph's with all of his kind of already his style and his kind of what makes him Joseph. He would have been very well suited for our modern age of big reveals and makeovers. He was made over, as we know in the Torah, a couple times. The Torah is pretty straightforward. The Midrash definitely, but he would have been very comfortable in our today's society. And this reveal that we get is really dramatic, is really something. So I'm posting up right now. We're going to go onto the Facebook. It's taking a second or two here, so I apologize. But let's take a look. And where we left off was just for people who weren't here, or just to remind everybody, Joseph. And we read one midrash that Joseph has told Benjamin from the outset that he's gonna make everybody squirm a little bit, that he's gonna set them up. That's one possibility. Doesn't seem to be in the Torah, and it also doesn't. It's not in every one of these midrashim. One of the things that we also see in this is that the brothers are very capable of going crazy against the people of Egypt, and what we were reminded of last week was that don't mess with Jacob's sons, because we know what they did to the city of Shechem, and then we read the Midrash a few weeks ago that they destroyed other cities, not just Shechem, in their defending their family and defending their honor. They also were also reminded that that we've been here before. We've been to Egypt before, and we essentially are telling the Egyptians, remember last time we were here in Egypt with our grandmother, our great-grandmother, excuse me, because these are the kids talking, our great-grandmother Sarah. Do you remember what happened when the Pharaoh, almost touched her? What happened? You guys all got struck by plague. Well, don't mess with us now. And so this is where we're picking up. It's Judah who's the brother who is the one we know from the portion, Vayigash, is the one who steps forward. He says, if I but utter a sound, death-dealing pestilence will stalk through the land as far as No, which is not a typo. That's the city. The city of No was the Hebrew word for the city of Thebes, or Luxor today, modern-day Luxor, one of the capitals, about 500 miles south of the Mediterranean was a capital of Egypt. So he says, I'm going to destroy this whole area all the way down to, from one end of your country to the other. If in this land, Pharaoh is the first and you are the second after him, but in our land, my father is the first and I'm the second. If you will not comply with our demand, I will draw my sword and hew you down first and then Pharaoh. Again, Judah doesn't know he's talking to his brother still. So let's read what happens. And this dramatic scene where, again, the brothers still don't know, or at least, again, maybe all the brothers but Benjamin don't know. But again, they don't know who they're talking to. They don't know they're talking to their brother. But they do know that they're talking to the head of Egypt, and they don't care. They don't care that this is, they're not afraid, hardly. They're ready to go to battle. So hold on one second. It did not go up on the Facebook. I'm going to try one more time, and hopefully it'll work this time. If not, it won't be on Facebook today. But I know some people are trying to get on, so I will try to get it up there. All right. All right, Judith, take it away.
If I but utter a sound, death dealing, farther down, you just rolled.
I just read that part, but go.
Okay, sorry. When Judah gave utterance to this threat, Joseph made a sign, and Manasseh stamped his foot on the ground so that the whole palace shook. Judah said, only one belonging to our family can stamp thus. And intimidated by this display of great strength, he moderated his tone and manner. From the very beginning, he continued to speak, you did resort to all sorts of pretexts in order to embarrass us. The inhabitants of many countries came down into Egypt to buy corn, and none of them did you ask questions about their family relations. In sooth, we did not come here to seek your daughter in marriage, or peradventure you desire our alliance with our sister. Nevertheless, we gave you an answer to all your questions. Joseph replied, verily, you can talk glibly. Is there another babbler like you among your brethren? Why do you speak so much, while your brethren that are older than you, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, stand by silent?
So Joseph kind of challenges him, and he's playing around with him even more. He's playing around with Judah even more, Joseph. Again, we know that, Joseph has already, he's been emotional before, but, let's watch what happens.
Judah, none of my brethren has so much at stake as I have, if Benjamin returns not to his father. I was a surety to my father for him, saying, if I bring him not to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever in this world and in the world to come. The other brethren withheld themselves intentionally from taking part in the dispute between Judah and Joseph, saying, kings are carrying on a dispute, and it is not seemly for us to interfere between them.
Okay, so let's explain what is going on here. The Midrash is asking an important question. Why is Judah the one who's involved here? There are 3 older brothers, and they're not involved. So the Midrash is essentially asking that question and answering that question for you. It's because Judah and Joseph are a little bit different. They're on a little bit different level than the rest of every, the rest of the family. And when 2 people at that level are going head to head, you get out of the way.
Even the angels descended from heaven to earth to be spectators of the combat between Joseph the bull and Judah the lion. And they said, it lies in the natural course of things that the bull should fear the lion, but here the 2 are engaged in equal furious combat.
Yeah, and again, the bull and the lion are 2 of the representations for the tribes that we have. So those are 2 pretty scary animals. Generally speaking, though, a bull would fear a lion, but not always. And definitely in this case, These are two that are, again, very scary. You get out of the way. So but those images of Judah the lion and Joseph as a bull are you'll see that in representations. I happened to have been at Eden Mortuary Cemetery a few days ago, and I saw they have a in front of the mausoleum, they have a gateway with the tribes, and I noticed I hadn't seen it in a while, I hadn't paid attention in a while, and it had Joseph represented with a bull, actually with two animals, a bull and a unicorn, and of course Judah's always the lion. So anyways, so let's read what happens with this battle, if you will, this battle royale.
Roll down a little bit.
Sorry, yeah.
In reply to Judah, when he explained that his great interest in Benjamin's safety was due to the pledge he had given to his father, Joseph spoke. Why were you not a surety for your other brother when you sold him for 20 pieces of silver? Then you did not regard the sorrow that was inflicted upon your father, but you did say, a wild beast has devoured Joseph. And yet Joseph had done no evil, while this Benjamin has committed theft. Therefore, go up and say unto your father, the rope has followed after the water bucket.
Yeah, and so he basically turned it on Judah and said, oh, really? You didn't do this for your other brother, of course, him, right? So he tells him that, and he also tells him, of course, that this phrase that we're going to see it a couple times repeated in the Midrash, the rope follows the water bucket, which is, one thing leads to another, right? And in this case, obviously, the bad thing you did there is going to lead to this bad thing, here. So, yeah, Joseph, just like you couldn't take care of Joseph, you can't take care of Benjamin either. And of course, this is Joseph saying it, still not telling them who he is. But all of this is adding to the already dramatic tension that we have from the Torah tells us happens, right? Again, as I said, very, very contemporary to, very much like the kind of television that we like to show today, which is the big reveal. All right, here we go.
These words had such an effect on Judah that he broke out in sobs and cried aloud, how shall I go up to my father and the lad be not with me? His outcry reached to a distance of 400 parsangs. And when Hushim, the son of Dan, heard it in Canaan, he jumped into Egypt with a single leap and joined his voice with Judah's, and the whole land was on the point of collapsing from the great noise they produced. Joseph's valiant men lost their teeth, and the cities of Pitom and Ramses were destroyed, and they remained in ruins until the Israelites built them up again under taskmasters.
Oh, okay. So let's just explain what you just read this. So when we built Pitom and Ramses, we actually rebuilt cities that we destroyed, yes. Which is a wonderful midrash. We had to go back, fix the damage that we did. So this is if you wondered why were Pitom and Ramses built by the Jews, the midrash just told us why. They were rebuilt by the Jews to rebuild the work that we did when we destroyed them here. When our ancestors went crazy with the Egyptians. Now, I will tell you, this is just the beginning, because the idea that Israel, that Jacob and Jacob's sons were about to destroy Egypt or destroyed parts of Egypt during this time are very much a part of the Midrash, which again, the rabbis have for several reasons, not least of which they explain things that happen later on, right? To some extent, they add to it which is what we just had with Pitom and Ramses. But there's a bigger issue here too, which is that the rabbis, interestingly, had a really big problem with Judah and what the brothers do here, because as much as they understand that they did something wrong and they have to go through an act of contrition, there is this issue here, which is that they don't know that this is Joseph. They don't know that this is, as far as they're concerned, this is an ordinary Egyptian. And the rabbis have this underlying problem with Jews groveling, especially not just any Jews, our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, groveling in front of an Egyptian. They really don't like that idea. They have a big problem with it, because while they might have been without power, the idea that their ancestors, our ancestors, were without power, that they have an issue with. So they really have this huge midrash here, and it's not just one midrash. There's several different midrashim here, that the brothers could have gone ballistic, could have gone crazy here, and part of the reason why they can't is because Joseph has the power, has superpowers, and again, they're restrained, and they don't do what they could have done, which is they could have gone crazy. Okay, so look, we have stories in the Torah. Abraham fighting battles with the kings of the East. We have the story of Shechem. We have stories that have our ancestors, our patriarchs, being pretty tough. But the Midrash takes it a step further and basically says, why doesn't it happen here? Why doesn't the Torah tell us about this? And they say it doesn't tell us about it, but it happened. So here's what happens.
Also, Judah's brethren, who had kept quiet up to that moment, fell into a rage and stamped on the ground with their feet until it looked as though deep furrows had been torn in it by a plowshare. And Judah addressed his brethren, "Be brave, demean yourselves as men, and that each one of you show his heroism, for the circumstances demand that we do our best." Then they resolved to destroy Mitzrayim, the city of Egypt. And Judah said, "I will raise my voice, and with it destroy Egypt." Reuven, "I will raise my arm and crush it out of existence." Shimon, "I will raise my hand and lay waste its palaces." Levi, "I will draw my sword and slay the inhabitants of Egypt." Issachar, "I will make the land like unto Sodom." Zebulun, "Like unto Gomorrah will I render it." Dan, "I will reduce it to a desert." Then Judah's towering rage began to show signs of breaking out. His right eye shed tears of blood. The hair above his heart grew so stiff that it pierced and rent the 5 garments in which he was clothed. And he took brass rods and bit them with his teeth and spat them out as fine powder. When Joseph observed these signs, fear befell him. And in order to show that he too was a man of extraordinary strength, he pushed with his foot against the marble pedestal upon which he sat, and it broke into splinters. Judah exclaimed, "This one is a hero equal to myself." Then he tried to draw his sword from its scabbard in order to slay Joseph, but the weapon could not be made to budge, and Judah was convinced thereby that his adversary was a God-fearing man, and he addressed himself to the task of begging him to let Benjamin go free. But he remained inexorable.
So again, there you see the brothers. They're and especially again here now, finally Judah. They're gonna go crazy. All right, but what happens? Here we go. Judah.
Too far.
Oh, sorry. No, right here. Judah then said.
Oh, there, yeah. Judah then said, "What shall we say to our father when he sees that our brother is not with us, and he will grieve over him?" Joseph, "Say that the rope has followed after the water bucket." Judah,
There's the line again, right?
Yeah.
That like somehow that phrase is going to make everything okay, right? Yeah.
Judah, "You are a king. Why do you speak in this wise, counseling a falsehood? Woe unto the king that is like you." Joseph, "Is there a greater falsehood than that you spoke concerning your brother Joseph, whom you sold to the Midianites for 20 pieces of silver, telling your father, 'An evil beast has devoured him'?"
Yeah, and again, it seems really clear that Joseph either has paid attention to the story really closely, or he's now just given away. He knows
more.
Knows a little too much. All right. So he says, look, he says, you're worried about telling what to tell your father? You, the guy who lied to your father about, again, what happened to me, So he, they're going back and forth.
Judah, The fire of Shechem burns in my heart. Now will I burn all your land with fire. Joseph, surely the fire kindled to burn Tamar, your daughter-in-law, who did kill your sons, will extinguish the fire of Shechem.
Wow. So he just hit back with something again. Now he's told a part of the story that wasn't even the story that involved him, the story of Judah and Tamar. What was so crazy about what he just did is he just threw it back on him. He just said, "Oh, really? You're so hot and you're so tough. You're the guy who almost killed an innocent woman." So this is a really powerful story because as the Midrash is retelling this, Joseph is throwing Judah's own history back at him and telling him, "Look what you did to me. Look what you did to Tamar." And it's even bigger. Again, none of this is not in the Torah, but the discussion between Judah and Joseph is in the Torah. It is the beginning of Parshat Vayigash. It is set up as a big story in the Torah. And so the Midrash does have to deal with it. The Midrash recognizes that it's an important story. So here's what happens.
Judah, if I pluck out a single hair from my body, I will fill the whole of Egypt with its blood. Joseph, such is it your custom to do this. Thus we did it to your brother whom you sold. And then you dipped his coat in blood, brought it to your father, and said, an evil beast has devoured him, and here is his blood.
Yeah, so he is using the story against him.
When Judah heard this, he was exceedingly wrath. And he took a stone weighing 400 shekels that was before him, cast it toward heaven with one hand, caught it with his left hand, then sat upon it, and the stone turned to dust. At the command of Joseph, Manasseh did likewise with another stone. And Joseph said to Judah, strength has not been given to you alone. We also are powerful men. Why then will you all boast before us? Then Judah sent Naphtali forth, saying, go and count all the streets of the city of Egypt, and come and tell me the number. But Shimon interposed, saying, let not this thing trouble you. I will go to the mount and take up one huge stone from the mount, throw it over the whole of Mitzrayim, the city of Egypt, and kill all therein. Hearing all these words, which they spoke aloud, because they did not know that Joseph understood Hebrew, you shifted.
Yep.
Joseph bade his son Manasseh make haste and gather together all the inhabitants of Egypt and all the valiant men, and let them come to him on horseback and afoot. Meantime, Naphtali had gone quickly to execute Judah's bidding, for he was as swift as the nimble hart. He could run across a field of corn without breaking an ear. And he returned and reported that the city of Egypt was divided into 12 quarters. Judah bade his brethren destroy the city. He himself undertook to raise 3 quarters, and he assigned the 9 remaining quarters to the others, 1 quarter to each. In the meantime,
again, here's another little play on the brothers and their symbols. Naphtali is usually represented by a deer or gazelle, and the blessings of Jacob, where he identifies qualities of his children. So according to the Midrash, Naphtali is fast like a gazelle, and so he has the superpower of being really fast. So this is kind of one of those great stories where everybody has a different superpower too. We love those kinds of stories. It's the original X-Men, Fantastic Four / Avengers, whatever you want. It's the great, those great stories of everybody having a special gift and working together. But this is not, this is a weird one because none of this is in the Torah. The threat of the destruction of Egypt, you really don't get from the Torah. Again, this idea that the sons of Jacob were holding this immense power, you almost get the exact opposite, which again is probably why the rabbis played it up. And maybe because when they wrote this, they were not in a period of extreme power. We're talking about now a time when Jews didn't even have their own army anymore to fight with. So to some extent, this really is a fantasy. This really is a projection of perhaps Jewish weakness and saying, you know what, what if we could do this against a country? And so, again, this is like after the Bar Kokhba revolt, where the idea of Jewish power is again more of a dream than a reality, and of course that in itself is a tragedy. We have less of a need for this to some extent and we can kind of like, I don't want to say laugh at it, but it's not. We don't realize what also is going on here, which is an expression of powerlessness, because we can defend ourselves today, thankfully, or as Jewish people, we know there is a Jewish army again. So this is maybe again one of the reasons why we have this in the Midrash, why this is so fantastic. But the Egyptians are also not to be trifled with. Here we go.
In the meantime, Menashe had assembled a great army, 500 mounted men and 10,000 on foot. Among them, 400 valiant heroes who could fight without spear or sword, using only their strong, unarmed hands. To inspire his brethren with more terror, Joseph ordered them to make a loud noise with all sorts of instruments, and their appearance and the hubbub they produced did indeed cause fear to fall upon some of the brethren of Joseph. Judah, however, called to them, "Why are you terrified, seeing that God grants us his mercy?" He drew his sword and uttered a wild cry, which threw all the people into consternation. And in their disordered flight, many fell over each other and perished. And Judah and his brethren followed after the fleeing people as far as the house of Pharaoh. Returning to Joseph, Judah again broke out in loud roars, and the reverberations caused by his cries were so mighty that all the city walls in Egypt and in Goshen fell in ruins. The pregnant women brought forth untimely births, and Pharaoh was flung from his throne. Judah's cries were heard at a great distance, as far off as Sukkot. When Pharaoh learned the reason of this mighty uproar, he sent word to Joseph that he would have to concede the demands of the Hebrews, else the land would suffer destruction. "You can take your choice," were the words of Pharaoh, "between me and the Hebrews, between Egypt and the land of the Hebrews. If you will not heed my command, then leave me and go with them into their land."
Wow. So the destruction got so bad that the Pharaoh was scared. Pharaoh was like, Joseph, you got to do something. You got to intervene here. They are, again, to some extent, little bit foreshadow, or should I say reminiscent, because it hasn't happened yet, but it's a foreshadow of what's going to happen later on to Pharaoh, right, to the Egyptians. And in this case, it gets so bad that, as we read, pregnant women brought forth untimely births because it was such a scary scene that was being created. And again, somebody's on. You need to mute that. Judith, I think that's yours.
I muted it. Did I not?
Not yet. So what happens is that Pharaoh has to intervene and tell Joseph, just do whatever these people want. We're going to lose our country with these crazy Jews. These crazy Jews are going to destroy us. So let's continue on, and I will. You ready? Yeah. So this is now Joseph. Oh, I want to show you one thing just quickly as we kind of break right. As there's a natural break right here. I want to just show you what the Torah actually says. So let's just go quickly to the Torah so you can see what is in the Torah and what is not in the Torah. And this is the beginning of Vayigash. This is the beginning of this part of the story. So you can see the Torah portion picks up in the middle of the chapter 44. So the part that we're reading right here is Judah, is what the Torah says Judah said to his brother, to Joseph. And here's the important part here. Judah is basically retelling the story at this point. Judah says, your servant, my father, said to us, as you know, my wife bore me 2 sons, but one is gone from me. And I said, alas, he was torn by a beast, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and he meets with disaster, you will send my white head down to Sheol in sorrow. Now, if I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, since his own life is bound up with us, when he sees that boy is not with us, he will die, and your servants will send the white head of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in grief. And again, now your servant has pledged himself, means Judah, for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, I shall stand guilty before my father forever. It's exactly what Judah said earlier in the Torah, what Judah said to him to allow him to take Benjamin down there. Therefore, please let your servant remain as a slave. Let me stay here instead of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers. How can I go back to my father unless the boy is with me? Let me be not a witness to the woe that would overtake my father. That is the way chapter 44 ends. That's it, right? So the Midrash is adding this whole other scene of this battle between them. And let us take a look. Let's go back to the Midrash so you can see what happens in this moment. Here you go.
Seeing that his brethren were indeed on the point of destroying Egypt, Joseph resolved to make himself known to them, and he cast around for a proper opening, which would lead naturally to his announcement. At his behest, Manasseh laid his hand upon Judah's shoulder, and his touch allayed Judah's fury, for he noticed that he was in contact with a kinsman of his, because such strength existed in no other family.
So right, remember Manasseh, Joseph's son, is his assistant, and he's the one who he's been sending out to do these different things, like bring them back and deal with them while they're in the court. Because again, Joseph knows that his son, having Jewish blood, can control these guys. Anybody else, the brothers are going to kill. So the Midrash has this amazing story that it's Manasseh that is doing all this stuff. So when Manasseh grabs Judah touches him on the back, Judah realizes this is strange, right? This is not what I expected to happen to me in Egypt. This has got to be an Israelite. It's got to be one of our family members. So that kind of starts to give things away to Judah that this is not what he expected, that maybe something's going on here, a little bit bigger. So again, as you saw, that's not there, that Manasseh is a part of this, but it is in the Midrash, and it kind of then allows for Judah to be calmed down and to take it down a notch. Here's what happens.
Then Joseph addressed Judah gently, saying, I should like to know who advised him to steal the cup. Could it have been one of you? Benjamin replied, neither did they counsel theft, nor did I touch the cup. Take an oath upon it, demanded Joseph, and Benjamin complied with his brother's request. I swear that I did not touch the cup. As true as my brother Joseph is separated from me, as true as I had nothing to do with the darts that my brother threw at him, as true as I was not one of those to take off his coat, as true as I had no part in the transaction by which he was given over to the Ishmaelites, as true as I did not help the others dip his coat in blood, so true is my oath, that they did not counsel theft, and that I did not commit theft.
Now notice that Benjamin disassociates himself from the rest of his brothers, and that he had nothing to do with that, right? So, Joseph knows that, but it is disassociation with the rest of the brothers. He's also associating with them to some extent because he's defending them. And again, it's a wonderful scene that's not in the Torah, but it kind of asks that question, well, what did Benjamin do? What did Benjamin do when he was in this situation of kind of being the one to blame? And so what Benjamin does here to some extent is puts Joseph in the situation of saying, oh, wait, he's recognized that I am his full brother, but he has a relationship with the brothers that is different. And it's one of those things that kind of gets to this other question where does Joseph start to understand through the story that maybe he was to blame a little bit, that maybe this isn't all about my brothers, that maybe it was a little bit about me. And so Benjamin's, first of all, obviously the way the brothers treat Benjamin is a big part of the story. That's obvious. But how Benjamin deals with his brothers is also something that the Midrash gives us might be the other side of this too, which is that maybe Benjamin teaches Joseph a little thing or two here about being a child of Rachel, that it's not just being a child of Rachel that sets you apart. Maybe Joseph's behavior set him apart. All right.
Joseph, how can I know that this oath of yours, taken upon your brother's fate, is true? Benjamin, from the names of my 10 sons, which I gave them in memory of my brother's life and trials, you can see how dearly I loved him. I pray you, therefore, do not bring down my father with sorrow to the grave. Hearing those words of abiding love, Joseph could refrain himself no longer. He could not but make himself known unto his brethren. He spoke these words to them. You said the brother of this lad was dead? Did you yourselves see him dead before you? They answered, yes. Joseph, did you stand beside his grave? The brethren, yes. Joseph, did you throw clots of earth upon his corpse? The brethren, nope. Then Joseph
Wait, hold right there. Let me just explain this right now.
Nope.
Because there is nothing in the Torah that says that Joseph was dead, right? We know the brothers know he's not dead, but they basically are trying to say they were responsible for his death, essentially. When they put him in that situation, they almost killed him, and essentially they did kill him. And they are as liable for his death as if they had killed him. And they're going to explain it now. So what you read, the rabbis know that they've taken it up a notch by saying that, by writing that. But there's a reason for it. And again, that's really dramatic. And now you're going to see, I think you might have figured out why they said it, but let's read it.
Then Joseph reflected, saying to himself, my brothers are as pious as before, and they speak no lies. They said I was dead, because when they abandoned me, I was poor, and a poor man is like unto a dead man. Did they stood beside my grave? That is the pit into which they cast me. But they did not say that they had shoveled earth upon me, for that would have been a falsehood.
Yep. And so this is this weird saying, which they basically, it's Joseph's explanation for the fact that, yeah, they pretty much left me for dead. And, but I wasn't, and they didn't lie just now either. Now, again, it's problematic because the brothers did lie. The rabbis try to get them off the hook for lying too, by basically saying they just brought back the coat. They didn't say he was devoured by a wild beast. They let Jacob say he's devoured by a wild beast. There's not a big difference in that, though. The rabbis are going to parse that a little bit and say they're devious and they're evil in their behavior, but they didn't lie. So that's the moment now where Joseph reveals himself. And here's the way they do it in the Midrash. It's pretty powerful.
Turning to his brethren, he said, you lie when you say that your brother is dead. He is not dead. You sold him, and I did buy him. I shall call him and set him before your eyes. And he began to call, Joseph, son of Jacob, come here. Joseph, son of Jacob, come here. Speak to your brethren who did sell you. The others turned their eyes hither and thither to the four corners of the house until Joseph called to them, why look you here and there? Behold, I am Joseph, your brother. Their souls fled away from them and they could make no answer, but God permitted a miracle to happen and their souls came back to them.
Yeah, so you just read they died. They were so scared, according to the Midrash, that they actually died. And just like Isaac, according to the Midrash, died when he was almost killed, according to this, they're so afraid. They're so dumbfounded. They're so shocked that they die. and God let them come back to life at that moment. So again, the key words is, that we have from the Torah, and it's so powerful, is I'm Joseph, your brother, right? And this is the line that, again, it's so powerful from the Torah. I mean, it is, when it says, the way the Torah says it, he cleared the room. He didn't want anybody in the room when he was revealing himself. But the interesting thing that the Torah says is that his sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear, and that the news got to Pharaoh's palace because of how emotional this was for Joseph. So he didn't want anybody to see this happen. He didn't want to have the Egyptians see him lose it, but they knew he lost it. And remember, this wasn't the first time that Joseph had to be excused and go off and cry somewhere. He had done it before. He had done it when his brothers first came. He did it when they defended Benjamin and said they weren't going to leave him. This has been emotional. The Torah tells us that this was an emotional experience for Joseph, that doing this was too much for him. And so even in the way the Torah presents it, when he says, I am Joseph, is my father still well? But his brothers could not answer him. So dumbfounded they were on account of him. And again, the Midrash is that they actually were not dumbfounded, that they were dead. And then Joseph says to his brothers, come forward to me. I am your brother Joseph, to who you sold. This is the reveal in a way that, again, when he says, I'm Joseph, your brother, Ani Yosef Achichem, those three words in Hebrew are so powerful, because in three words, he tells him, I'm your brother, I'm alive. And he doesn't just say, I'm Joseph, I am Joseph. He says, I'm Joseph, your brother. And the words, all three of those words together have an impact that it goes through time, and we feel that moment of forgiveness in that at that time, at that moment, which is again, it's one of the most emotional experiences that we ever read about. I like to always share that when we get to it, it's the famous story of Pope, now Saint John the 23rd, who was the Pope who did more to reconcile the Catholic Church and the Jewish people than really anybody. He started Second Vatican. He didn't get to live to see the end of Second Vatican Council, which completely changed the liturgy of the Catholic Church to take out anti-Semitic references. He died in 1963, before it could go. But as important as that was, and it really was important, I don't want to diminish that, the man actually rescued thousands of people during the Holocaust. And including Hungarian Jews who were able to get fake baptismal certificates. So he did that because it was so important for him to save lives. So we talk a lot about what the Catholic Church didn't do and what they did do during the Holocaust that resulted in death. He's an exception that was a very powerful one. So the story goes that in 1960, an American, and you can look here at the screen, a delegation of American Jewish leaders presented the Pope with a Torah to express their gratitude for the lives he saved during the Holocaust. And he said, we're all sons of the same Heavenly Father. Among us, there must always be and ever be the brightness of love in its practice. He concluded, I am Joseph, your brother. Because that was his name, Giuseppe Roncalli. So that is the story. I always like saying when we read the story of Joseph, I am Joseph, your brother. I think about that story. So that is the story of a modern day Joseph, a modern day person who worked on forgiveness. Again, in his case, he was asking for forgiveness and flipping the story on its head, but he knew exactly what he was doing when he said those words, I'm Joseph, your brother. And using the Torah to bring healing. So let's take a look at the way the Midrash does it, because they make it also even more powerful.
Joseph continued, you see it with your own eyes, and also my brother Benjamin sees it with his eyes, that I speak with you in Hebrew, and I am truly your brother. But they would not believe him. Not only had he been transformed from a smooth-faced youth into a bearded man since they abandoned him, but also the forsaken youth now stood before them the ruler of Egypt. Therefore Joseph bared his body and showed them that he belonged to the descendants of Abraham.
So I just want to point out, I knew we'd get to this today. The big reveal, according to the Midrash, was truly a big reveal. It was, you just read it, and I knew we'd get to it, and wow. Again, assumedly there was nobody left in the room except for family when he did the big reveal. But yeah, that's what you just read. He showed him the covenant of Abraham, which requires a full body viewing. That was the way that they knew, because they still didn't believe it, that he had to show him he was circumcised. Now, it has been pointed out by other people, not just, and I'm not just going to share something right now, is that the thanks, Judith. And then the fact that Egyptians might have been circumcised too. So whether or not the showing of a circumcision was enough to prove that you were truly Hebrew is another question. The rabbis don't seem to be concerned with that or know that. It could be, again, because by the time the rabbis wrote this, the Egyptian people were no longer practicing circumcision. Kind of leave it at that, other than no, but I mean, in reality, if the rabbis are writing in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century of the Common Era, Egyptians are Greek really by that point, and Greeks and Romans did not like circumcision at all. They frowned on it. They thought it was an abomination. They thought it was a mutilation of the human body. And so for them, Egyptians wouldn't have been. We know about it because we maybe know more about ancient Egyptian history than the rabbis did, ironically, even though they were closer to it. They were 1,000 years away, or 1,500 years away from it, and we're 3,500 years away from it. But we know that Egyptians, or at least Egyptian royalty, would oftentimes be circumcised, Egyptian priests. So it shouldn't have been a surprise. But again, from the rabbi's point of view, thinking about Egyptians during the time of Cleopatra and her family, like the Ptolemies, they wouldn't have been circumcised. So it's maybe anachronistic, but it's not anachronistic in the way you think it is. This could have been, from their standpoint, Egyptians would not have been circumcised. So it's a very well-written midrash, because it's a play on several things, not only the circumcision, but notice he transformed from a smooth-faced youth into a bearded man. The bearded man has been essentially shaved in that area. And this is meant to be a play on the body in this midrash. And again, the rabbis are concerned with, well, what happened to him now? What happened to the brothers while they're standing there? In this remarkable reveal. Here we go.
Abashed, they stood there, and in their rage, they desired to slay Joseph as the author of their shame and their suffering. But an angel appeared and flung them to the 4 corners of the house. Judah raised so loud an outcry that the walls of the city of Egypt tumbled down. Again, the women brought forth untimely births. Again, Joseph and Pharaoh both rolled down off their thrones, and Joseph's 300 heroes lost their teeth again, and their heads remained forever immobile, facing backward as they had turned themselves to discover the cause of the tumult. Yet the brethren did not venture to approach close to Joseph. They were too greatly ashamed of their behavior toward their brother. He sought to calm them, saying, "Now be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves that you sold me here. For God did send me before you to preserve life."
And again, that last line is what the Torah says Joseph said. But in the meantime, the Midrash gives us this interesting view into the internal thought process of the brothers, which is, oh, they're happy to see Joseph. They're happy that he's alive, but maybe a little bit pissed that they just got put through hell and thought that their lives were over. And it was a game to Joseph. So, maybe they went through a little bit of, this was a game to you. And so this is also an issue that the rabbis are going to address. Look, there is this issue of were the brothers, if the brother, and the rabbis' minds, the brothers were powerful enough to deal with it. So that they've already given us that possibility. But of course, the Torah doesn't seem to be that the brothers are any type of power position at all. But there is this weird thing too, which is, if Joseph has that kind of power, why does he even have to go through this? Why doesn't he just take Benjamin? Why didn't he take Benjamin in the first place? Well, all of these things are a possibility. And again, if you want to get to why Joseph doesn't take Benjamin in the first place, the rabbis gave you an answer, which is that the brothers, you could have taken the whole Egyptian army and it wouldn't have gotten Benjamin, because the brothers would have fought him. So that's one possibility. I mean, they kind of answered that. But there's this other issue, which is there seems to be this feeling all along that Joseph is obviously testing to see how the brothers will react to Benjamin, but that if Benjamin, that maybe he can get Benjamin to stay there. If his ruse goes through and he's able to keep Benjamin, then he is able to keep Benjamin without having the brothers be upset, well, not be upset, but do anything about it. If Benjamin is there as a payback for theft, then Benjamin, he gets to keep his brother Benjamin, and the whole thing kind of like plays out as a, it's what we had to do. We had to leave Benjamin back in Egypt because, we stole. So there seems to be this kind of weird thing about what does Benjamin have to do with this story on his own, not with the brothers, but on his own. And this is why this next part is here about Benjamin.
Even such kind words of exhortation did not banish their fear. And Joseph continued to speak. "As little as I harbor vengeful thoughts in my heart against Benjamin, so little do I harbor them against you." And still his brethren were ill at ease. And Joseph went on, "Think you that it is possible for me to inflict harm upon you? If the smoke of 10 candles could not extinguish one, how can one extinguish 10? At last the brethren were soothed, and they went up to Joseph, who knew each by name, and weeping, he embraced and kissed them all in turn. The reason why he wept was that his prophetic spirit showed him the descendants of his brethren enslaved by the nations. Especially did he weep upon Benjamin's neck, because he foresaw the destruction decreed for the 2 temples to be situated in the allotment of Benjamin. And Benjamin also wept upon Joseph's neck, for the sanctuary at Shiloh in the territory of Joseph, which was likewise doomed to destruction.
Right. So, so the Midrash gives us another kind of detail, which is that Joseph kind of went up to each brother individually and kind of made up with each one of them, had a moment with each one. And the rabbis say that we take away from that it's because Joseph was also kind of dealing with the fact that he's a prophet and he knows what's going to happen. and he knows that the Jewish people are going to suffer, terrible destruction. And particularly when he goes to cry with Benjamin, that he weeps with Benjamin for the destruction of Jerusalem, the first temple and the second temple. But then it says something really powerful, which is that Benjamin wept back with him for the destruction of Shiloh, which was one of the original places where the ark was. Before there was a temple, there was a tabernacle placement at Shiloh, and Shiloh is destroyed too. We're not exactly sure how Shiloh is destroyed. It just says it's destroyed, but assumedly it's by the Philistines, and the Philistines definitely wind up with the ark, Shiloh, and it doesn't go back to Shiloh afterwards, but it doesn't really talk per se about the destruction of Shiloh like it does Jerusalem, but it is destroyed. And so the rabbis kind of say, here's this foreshadowing for the destruction of Shiloh. And then later on, about 100 years later, we'll have Jerusalem will be built, but then it'll be destroyed by the Babylonians, and then later on by the Romans. And Joseph sees the future, and they weep there, not just for themselves and for lost time and for the sadness of what happened in this family dynamic, but they weep for Jewish history yet to come.
Where is Shiloh?
So Shiloh is in the territory of Ephraim, and it is again where the tabernacle was during the time of Samuel. So during the time of Shmuel, it is in Shiloh. It's where Eli the prophet is, and
Right.
it is a proto-temple, if you will. It is a temple before there's a temple. There is Shiloh, and there is a Jewish community now in Shiloh in the West Bank, as it's sometimes called, or also as it's known as Judea Samaria, that there is a place of Shiloh, and I will show it in a second. But it's pretty powerful that the Torah tells us that they're not just weeping for their own family dynamic, they're weeping for Jewish history. And it is, of course, it's not Shiloh during the Battle of Shiloh. It's the original Shiloh, which is, I'll show you right here on the map. Let me just bring up the map that I usually use is the modern map of Israel, which doesn't always have the ancient, it only has an ancient city name. If that ancient city name is still what it's known as. So let me see if it's on this map, this modern map of Israel, since you asked. Well, it is. I'm going to show it right now. Hold it. Here we go. Here you go. So if you look on the map right here, there's Shiloh, which this is all Jewish area right here. Eli, Givat Harel, Shiloh is all Jewish right here. And if I pull out further, you'll see that there's also some Arab cities right here, Arab villages, and right here, and right here, and right here. So here's Shiloh. And if I go back a little further, here's Beit El down here. There's what Beit El is, Bethel. And if I pull out a little further, you'll see where Jerusalem is. So you can't see Shiloh and
Jerusalem at the same
Jerusalem at the same time, but you can see as the crow flies, it's about here to here. It's about 20, 25 miles, but it would have been a good couple day journey back in the day. But again, this whole area was the heartland of the Jewish people. So that is why those areas are not contiguous. If there is a Palestinian state one day in that area, you've got these areas here, which are Palestinian, and you have this area here, which is Israeli or Jewish. This area right here is Jewish. This area right here is Jewish, and then this area around here is Arab. So I can't even show it on a map. Well, I could. If I found a different map, I could show it to you. But it is a place now you can go to. You can go to Shiloh, and again, there are Jews living there once again. So let us turn back to the Midrash and what happens here with this reconciliation. So we've gotten finally we've gotten to the part where they are they've made up.
Pharaoh was well pleased with the report of the reconciliation between Joseph and the Hebrews, for he had feared that their dissensions might cause the ruin of Egypt. And he sent his servants to Joseph, that they take part in his joy. Also he sent word to Joseph that it would please him well if his brethren took up their abode in Egypt, and he promised to assign the best parts of the land to them for their dwelling place. Not all the servants of Pharaoh were in agreement with their master concerning this invitation to the Hebrews. Many among them were disquieted, saying, "If one of the sons of Jacob came here, and he was advanced to a high position over our heads, what evil will happen to us when 10 more come here?" Joseph
wait, everybody gets what just happened here. If one Jew winds up being the head of our country, what happens if 10 more Jews come here? This will be the end of our country as we know it. So where have we heard this one before?
Excuse me.
Bless you. This is, let's get a quota in place real quick because, again, the great sages at Harvard University, where Judith's dad was at school, decided for a good chunk of time, we're going to not let any more of those Jews in, because if they're already taken over and at the top of the class, what's going to happen if we let more of them in? And sure enough, that's why we had quotas. That's why there's a Brandeis University, because we had to start doing our own universities and our own hospitals, because people were saying, what happens if they get in power? There's a midrash on that. Believe me, there's a midrash for that too. So here's what happens. And again, it's not in the Torah, but this wonderful idea that not all Egyptians were as gung-ho about this as the Pharaoh.
Joseph gave all his brothers 2 changes of raiment, one for use on the ordinary days of the week, and one for use on the Sabbath. For when the cup was found with Benjamin, they had rent their clothes, and Joseph would not have his brothers go about in torn garments. But to Benjamin he gave 5 changes of raiment, though not in order to distinguish him above his brothers. Joseph remembered only too well what mischief his father had caused by giving him the coat of many colors, thereby arousing the envy of his brothers. He desired only to intimate that Mordecai, a descendant of Benjamin, would once be arrayed in 5 royal garments.
Right. So he's going to give him clothes. He gives a little bit more clothes to Benjamin, but then he says, you know what? If you were going to say, well, Benjamin gets so much more clothes, well, that's going to start problems again. But he says, no, it really wasn't because of that. It's because of Mordecai, who's going to have these beautiful clothes one day. So it's again, a foreshadowing for something else that will happen later on in the Torah. But this is all part of the other theme that we have in the story, folks. Clothes, all throughout the story.
Clothes.
We have clothes being given. We have clothes being ripped. We have clothes being put on a person so that they're now important. All of these themes are clothes being torn for criminal, ends up, Joseph's coat being torn, Joseph's garment being torn by Potiphar's wife, the brothers tearing their clothes when they find out their brother Benjamin's going to be held hostage. All these things, again, part of the theme here. But it's not just the clothes.
Joseph presented his brothers, appareled in their gold and silver embroidered clothes, before Pharaoh, who was well pleased to become acquainted with them when he saw that they were men of heroic stature and handsome appearance. He gave them wagons to bring their families down to Egypt. But as they were ornamented with images of idols, Judah burnt them, and Joseph replaced them with 11 other wagons, among them the one he had ridden in at his accession to office to view the land of Egypt.
Yeah, so he said, you know what? I don't need your pagan carts. I wonder what he would have thought of the Jaguar on top of the car. No, Judah didn't like those carts, but we got new ones. And these carts are important for the story because
this was to be used by his father on his journey to Egypt. For each of his brother's children, he sent raiments, and also 100 pieces of silver for each. But for each of the children of Benjamin, he sent 10 changes of raiment. And for the wives of his brethren, he gave them rich garments of state, such as were worn by the wives of the pharaohs, and also ointments and aromatic spices. To his sister Dinah, he sent silver and gold embroidered clothes, and myrrh, aloes, and other perfumes. And such presents he also gave to the other wife and the daughters-in-law of Benjamin. For themselves and for their wives, the brethren received all sorts of precious stones and jeweled ornaments, like those that are worn by the Egyptian nobility.
Right. So, wonderful gifts. It's nice. He gives his sister Dinah some special gifts too, which is nice. Think about that, right? You know, that Dinah in this Midrash is still alive. We read one Midrash that she dies. But in this one, she's still around. She gets taken care of. Still part of the family. And Joseph loves her and wants to make sure she's okay too. That she's taken care of. So these people are going to come down to Egypt in style. Now, interestingly, of course, Joseph doesn't go get his father. Right? It's got to be brought down to them. Here we go.
Joseph accompanied his 11 brothers to the frontier, and there he took leave of them with the wish that they and all their families come down to Egypt. And he enjoined upon them, besides, 3 maxims to be observed by travelers. Do not take too large steps. Do not discuss halachic subjects, that you lose not your way, and enter the city at the latest with the going down of the sun.
Yeah, we mentioned this before. We read this before. You got a late check-in at the hotel, right? So you don't get to the place too early. There might also have been actually something here which we don't understand because we don't live in times like these anymore, where people come into a city and have to pass through a gate and through customs and a visa passport checkpoint, if you will, every time they came into a city. That maybe it was better to come in towards the end of the day when the guards were getting lazy and tired and their shift was coming to an end, right? So maybe it's best to come in towards the end of the day instead of, coming in the middle of the day when it's hot and they're tired already, but, they're just at the beginning of their shift and they're not in a good mood. You want to catch them when they're just stamping the passport, right? And not asking a lot of questions. But the other ones also probably had to do with, again, the way Jewish travelers would travel. I mean, one of them seems to be a little superstitious, not taking too large of steps, but
no, because then you fall.
Yeah, I guess, but there's probably a, yes, it's I guess it's a little bit more dangerous, but and not stepping on cracks and those kinds of things. That's not here, but there were Jewish travelers' warnings, admonitions. This isn't the only place.
I like the don't be distracted by your cell phone.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was really good. They're definitely warning people of, getting into a big discussion and before they know it, where are we? So they warn people about getting involved in a discussion that's going to take them away from the path. Interestingly, of course, because halakha means the way, right? It's a path, but it's a play on that, which is that your path sometimes, your bigger path could take you off your smaller path. And So they're warning people about doing that. Again, there does seem to be this issue that Joseph can't leave the land, which is an interesting one, given that maybe, again, that Joseph became like a totem to the Egyptian people, that he can't, if he leaves, everything's going to go to hell, that, the country loses its mojo if he leaves. So he can't go. He doesn't go. Even the fact that Joseph never steps foot in the land of Israel for the rest of his life is strange. Even, again, maybe accentuated by the fact that he makes this plea with his family on his deathbed, please make sure I'm buried in Israel. So even though he doesn't ever have a chance to go back to Israel maybe in his lifetime, that he is able to go there when he dies. It's a weird idea, which is that Joseph was so magical that his body carried, power with it. And that that there's this weird idea that even though Joseph is second to Pharaoh, there is something with this responsibility and with his power, which is that he can't leave the country. He literally is trapped. He's being held hostage to some extent in the country, which I find to be an interesting, it's the flip side, it's the other side of power, of having that kind of power. He can never live a normal life, and he can't really live the life of an Israelite ever again. It's kind of weird, right? Well, let's read what happens. We're going to read a little bit about what happens with Jacob. I was going to try to see how much of this we could read. We can't read the whole thing today, maybe, but we will read at least Jacob learning about, or some of what happens when Jacob learns. Because remember, this poor man doesn't know that his son is alive. And by the way, let's make this point very important. Joseph had the power to let his father know this whole time that he was alive. He didn't do it. I mean, granted, he's mad at his brothers. He's whatever. Has a plan, if you will. But it still begs the question, and the rabbis know it. Why doesn't he tell his father that he's alive? His father could have died. Any of these months or years that he's gone, could have died not knowing that his son is alive this whole time. What a horrible thing. Let's read what happens when Jacob finds out.
Jacob receives the glad tidings. In blithe spirits, the sons of Jacob journeyed up to the land of Canaan. But when they reached the boundary line, they said to one another, "How shall we do? If we appear before our father and tell him that Joseph is alive, he will be greatly frightened, and he will not be inclined to believe us." Besides, Joseph's last injunction to them had been to take heed and not startle their father with tidings of joy.
So they don't want to kill him with the good news. Don't startle him too much. He'll have a heart attack. So what are they going to do? How do they tell their dad this? And again, it begs the bigger question. Why are we telling him? Why doesn't Joseph tell him? Why didn't Joseph tell him before? All right.
On coming close to their habitation, they caught sight of Sarah, the daughter of Asher, a very beautiful maiden and very wise, who was skilled in playing upon the harp.
Now, I will just say this. We already have read once about Sarah. We've read about it in our other class, too. She is a miracle woman. Sarah has a role to play in the history of the Jewish people, which is almost like she's a Methuselah. She is a person who comes down to Egypt with her family now. She's going to come down. She's the daughter of Asher. And according to the Torah, she's still alive when the Jews come back from Egypt. So she lives a long time. But because of this, she is the repository of knowledge. She's the one who can tell them everything that happened. And so she becomes in the Midrash this paradigm of wisdom, and really wisdom, of experience, of life experience. So what's so interesting about it is that we have kind of this mythological character in in our midrash, in our Jewish stories, and it's a woman. It's not a man. It's a woman. We have Methuselah, but Methuselah wasn't a Jew. He was our ancestor, but he was, again, before Noah. He's antediluvian. He's pre-flood. So he's really, really old, from old times. But we have a version of this kind of thing, which is Sarah. Now we also have Elijah, but Elijah is a little different in that he kind of goes back between heaven and earth. And he can still come back today. But Sarah is just someone who lives a really long time in our world and is able to tell us things and guide us and be the person who can essentially be the inspiration and the font of wisdom. And it's a woman. I mean, think about that, how important that is, that she is the example. It's pretty powerful. It's something, again, that a lot of people don't know, but it is a very, very old traditional part of the Midrash. So here's what happens with what she does. She's already wise, even though right now she's still young. She's still in her youth.
They summoned her to them and gave her a harp and bade her play before Jacob and sing that which they should tell her. She sat down before Jacob, and, with an agreeable melody, she sang the following words, accompanying herself upon the harp. I'm not going to sing that. Joseph, my uncle.
You gotta sing it. No, it's okay. She did. She was one of those people who could just start singing.
Joseph, my uncle, lives. He rules over the whole of Egypt. He is not dead. She repeated these words several times. And Jacob grew more and more pleasurably excited. His joy awakened the Holy Spirit in him, and he knew that she spoke the truth. The spirit of prophecy never visits a seer when he is in a state of lassitude or in a state of grief. It comes only together with joy. All the years of Joseph's separation from him, Jacob had had no prophetic visions because he was always sad. And only when Sarah's words reawakened the feeling of happiness in his heart, the prophetic spirit again took possession of him. Jacob rewarded her, therefore, with the words, "My daughter, may death never have power over you, for you did revive my spirit." And so it was. Sarah did not die. She entered paradise alive. At his bidding, she repeated the words she had sung again and again, and they gave Jacob great joy and delight, so that the Holy Spirit waxed stronger and stronger within him.
Yeah, it's a beautiful midrash because not only does it give us this powerful, wise woman who shows her wisdom and her talents even at a young age, but it shows us Jacob kind of coming back to life through the power of music. What happens what happens with music and why music is so important to bring people joy, and why it's used in hospice. A little emotional talking about this, but we just had my dad got sung to a couple days ago, and again yesterday by a hospice person, and it does do amazing things to people to hear music. And of course they tell people to play music and have music going on in the background, which we're doing with my dad right now. But it is amazing to think about what can be conveyed in music. And in this case, again, the fact that Jacob learns that there is hope for his family and his reconciliation, and he starts to feel the energy coming back. And the brothers haven't even spoken to him yet. It's only Sarah's song. It's only his knowledge that, this is really true. He knows it's true because the prophetic power has come back to him. He hasn't had it for this whole period of time. It's coming back to him, right? And here it is.
While he was sitting thus in conversation with Sarah, his sons appeared, arrayed in all their magnificence. and with all the presents that Joseph had given them. And they spoke to Jacob, saying, "Glad tidings, Joseph our brother lives. He is ruler over the whole land of Egypt, and he sends you a message of joy." At first Jacob would not believe them, but when they opened their packs and showed him the presents Joseph had sent to all, he could not doubt the truth of their words any longer. Joseph had had a premonition that his father would...
Hold it right there. Let me just show you why this is, why do we have this? For those who know the story of the Torah pretty well, it says, the brothers went up from Egypt and they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they told him, Joseph is still alive. Yes. That's what it says. Yes.
Woohoo.
Od Yosef Chai. Od Yosef Chai. V'chihu. And yes, he is the ruler over the whole land of Egypt. And it says, and his heart went numb. And that word, his heart went numb, for he did not believe them, tells you that Jacob really didn't believe him, right? But when they recounted all that Joseph had said to them, and we saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport, the spirit of their father revived. And that's why we have this spirit coming back to him. Ruach Yaakov, the spirit of Jacob. And he said, enough, said Israel. My son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die. Wow. So let's read how, again, let's go back to the Midrash and see what happens. Midrash.
Joseph had had a premonition that his father would refuse to give his brothers credence because they had tried to deceive him before. And it is the punishment of the liar that his words are not believed even when he speaks the truth. He had therefore said to them, if my father will not believe your words, tell him that when I took leave of him to see whether it was well with you, he had been teaching me the law of the heifer whose neck is broken in the valley. When they repeated this, every last vestige of Jacob's doubt disappeared, and he said, great is the steadfastness of my son Joseph. In spite of all his suffering, he has remained constant in his piety. Yea, great are the benefits that the Lord has conferred upon me. He saved me from the hands of Esau and from the hands of Lavan and from the Canaanites who pursued after me. I have tasted many joys, and I hope to see many more, but never did I hope to set eyes upon Joseph again. And now I shall go down to him and behold him before my death.
Wow. So beautiful way that the Midrash presents Jacob's feelings of gratitude. Again, he says, I've been through tough times. I've been through good times. I never thought I'd be able to see him ever again. And again, according to this Midrash, how does Jacob really know that Joseph is alive? Because how can he trust these guys, right? Is that Joseph tells him what he was talking about the last time they were together. The last time Joseph was with his dad was teaching him Torah, which of course implies that Joseph and Jacob and the sons knew the Torah, right? The Torah was known before it was given by the patriarchs. Rabbis want you to know that. They want you to make sure they know that. But that's not really the whole point. The point is, of course, that it's a code. It's not a code. It's a secret, right? It's only something that the two of them would have known. And so by proving that, now they know. Now Jacob knows that they're telling the truth. So this tremendous weight has been lifted off of Jacob's life, that, the son that he thought was dead is now alive, which again, the rabbis have to tell us that he lost his prophetic powers, though we do have midrashim that he did kind of suspect that Joseph was still alive. The other possibility, which again seems to be the one that the Torah tells us here again, which is that he didn't know, he must not have had his prophetic abilities during this time. And he loses them because he's so sad. He doesn't have his prophetic abilities at all during this time. So the impact that Joseph's disappearance had on Jacob was profound. It affected their father deeply, and that he couldn't be the person that he would have been otherwise. I mean, think about that. All his prophetic abilities, his ability to kind of figure things out and to have that holiness. He didn't have it while Joseph was gone. It's a huge thing to strip somebody of. The ability to have that, which must have been powerful, must have been wonderful to have that, and he doesn't have it. All right, so here's what happens.
Jacob, however, would not go down into Egypt without first inquiring whether it was the will of God that he should leave the Holy Land. He said, "How can I leave the land of my fathers, the land of my birth, the land in which the Shekhinah dwells, and go to an unclean land inhabited by slaves of the sons of Ham, a land wherein there is no fear of God?" Then he brought sacrifices in honor of God, in the expectation that a divine vision would descend upon him and instruct him whether to go down into Egypt or have Joseph come up to Canaan. He feared the sojourn in Egypt, for he remembered the vision he had had at Bethel on leaving his father's house. And he said to God, "I resemble my father. As he was greedy in filling his maw, so am I, and therefore I would go down into Egypt in consequence of the famine. As my father preferred one son to the other, so had I a favorite son. And therefore I would go down into Egypt to see Joseph. But in this I do not resemble my father. He had only himself to provide for, and my house consists of 70 souls. And therefore am I compelled to go down into Egypt. The blessing which my father gave me was not fulfilled in me, but in my son Joseph, whom people serve, and before whom nations bow down."
Wow. So here's a weird scene, that internal scene that we don't have in the Torah, which is that Jacob, the rabbis want to explain, why did Jacob go down to Egypt? I mean, he's the father. He doesn't have to go down. Why doesn't Joseph, I guess we know why Joseph won't come back, but why does the rest of the family have to go down? Why do they have to stay? And here the rabbis kind of answer the question with Jacob kind of admitting his own faults. And he's basically saying, I have no choice. I have to go down. I have to take care of my family. And this enormous responsibility is going to put me in a situation where I don't get to live in the land of Israel. So he's faced with this dilemma. Either I stay in the land of Israel or I take care of my family. I can't have both. And so he picks taking care of my family. And this is, again, it's not in the Torah. The rabbis ask the question because it's a legitimate question. I mean, you're taking a patriarch away from the land of Israel. He doesn't have to, assumedly with Joseph's power and Joseph's wealth, he can sustain the family back in the land of Israel. These are questions that the rabbis ask, which you and I can ask. It's a fair question to ask. Why do they have to go down to Egypt? Now you and I know there's a bigger issue. Because we go to Egypt, we wind up as slaves. Now, there's the possibility that this was all preordained anyways, that we had to be slaves, which is something that Joseph seems to be a participant of. In the Midrash, we've already read that Joseph says, I've got to play my part in this. I have to be in Egypt so that I can facilitate my own people being slaves in this land. Again, it calls into question, why does that have to happen? Why do they have to experience slavery? But Jacob doesn't say that. Jacob doesn't go down that road of saying, oh, well, that's where the people have to be. He kind of says, this is not where they have to be. It's not where I have to be. I shouldn't have to be, but I have to be now because that's where they are. And I'm going to go where my family is. And he essentially says that. He says, I'm going to go live in Springfield, Missouri, because that's where my family is. No, and honestly, this is literally, I will go wherever my family goes. And I am going to, and there are people who've done it. And there are people who, again, the rabbis are saying, even for our patriarch, even for our and of course Diane's on the line too, going up to the Bay Area, at least in California. But people make these accommodations to be by their family when they know that it's not where they want to be. It's not necessarily their first choice, but they have to live there because that's where their family is. And so the rabbis are essentially saying that Jacob was even going to give up what it means to be in the land of Israel. And this is a big deal. I mean, our sages knew that this was a big deal. Let's read what they say about it. This is the last couple paragraphs we're going to read about this. Because leaving the land of Israel, the rabbis can't leave that alone. They can't just say, oh, he left. Okay, he left. No, shouldn't have happened. Okay.
Scroll up. Other way.
Oh.
And the Shekhinah.
Yeah.
Here,
yep.
The Shekhinah, there it is. Then the Shekhinah addressed Jacob, calling his name twice in token of love, and bidding him not to fear the Egyptian slavery foretold. Wait a minute. Then the Shekhinah addressed Jacob, calling his name twice in token of love, and bidding him not to fear the Egyptian slavery foretold for the descendants of Abraham, for God would have pity upon the suffering of his children and deliver them from bondage. God furthermore said, I will go down into Egypt with you. And the Shekhinah accompanied Jacob thither, bringing the number of the company with which he entered Egypt up to 70. But as Jacob entertained fears that his descendants would stay there forever, God gave him the assurance that he would lead him forth together with all the pious that were like to him. And God also told Jacob that Joseph had remained steadfast in his piety even in Egypt, and he might dismiss all doubts from his mind on this score, for it was his anxiety on this account that had induced Jacob to consider going down into Egypt. He wanted only to make sure of Joseph's faithfulness and then return home. But God commanded him to go there and remain there.
So God literally had to convince Jacob to go down. That God said, "You've got to play this out. Your family are going to be slaves there. It's what has to happen." And but I'm going to be with you. The divine presence will be with you in Egypt, which is interesting because, again, it's basically telling us that while we were slaves, while we were in Egypt through those generations of servitude and bondage, that the Shekhinah was with us in the land of Egypt. Now, it kind of makes sense in that the Shekhinah guides us and is with us on our way back to the land of Israel. So the Shekhinah is with us in the desert. The divine presence is with us. But there is this feeling, again, the rabbis want you to know that Jacob has to be told by God, it'll be okay. I'll be with you. You don't have to worry. And that it will be okay. What's interesting is that there's actually going to be now, and this is, I think, where we'll read the next couple of paragraphs, try to get through these. There actually is a physical something that he takes with him too. Not just the Shekhinah, which you think that would be enough. No, according to Midrash, Jacob does something else.
God with me. Before Jacob left Canaan, he went to Beersheba to hew down the cedars that Abraham had planted there and take them with him to Egypt. For centuries, these cedar trees remained in the possession of his descendants. They carried them with them when they left Egypt, and they used them in building the tabernacle.
So there's a little piece of Israel that they take with them and keep it the whole time that they're in Egypt. And they're going to use that same cedar to help build the tabernacle. Not the ark, but the tabernacle, the tent poles. And the rabbi said, well, where did this cedar come from? They know that it says that they use cedar for it. Well, there's not cedar in the Sinai, in the desert. There's no cedar trees. There is in the land of Israel. There were. Of course, there's cedars in Lebanon, but there were cedars, at least according to the Torah, during the time of Abraham. And there probably were, by the way, based on the climate change and the changes over the years and deforestation. But there were cedars there, and there are again in Israel cedars. But these cedars were a way for the Jews to connect to the land of Israel while they were in Egypt during all those years. And then it becomes part of the tabernacle. It becomes part of the holiest place for us. So let's read what happens when they go down.
Although Joseph had put wagons at the disposal of his brethren for the removal of his family from Canaan to Egypt, they yet carried Jacob upon their arms, for which purpose they divided themselves into 3 divisions, one division after the other assuming the burden. As a reward for their filial devotion, God redeemed their descendants from Egypt.
They didn't let their dad go on a cart. They carried him on their backs.
Judah was sent on ahead by his father to erect a dwelling in Goshen, and also a Beit HaMidrash, that Jacob might set about instructing his sons at once after his arrival. He charged Judah with this honorable task in order to compensate him for a wrong he had done him. All the years of Joseph's absence, he had suspected Judah of having made away with Rachel's son. How little the suspicion was justified, he realized now, when Judah in particular had been assiduous in securing the safety of Benjamin, the other son of Rachel. Jacob therefore said to Judah, "You've done a pious, God-bidden deed, and have shown yourself to be a man capable of carrying on negotiations with Joseph. Complete the work you have begun. Go to Goshen, and together with Joseph, prepare all things for our coming. Indeed," continued Jacob, "you were the cause of our going down into Egypt, for was it your suggestion that Joseph was sold as a slave, and also through your descendants, Israel will be led forth out of Egypt." Well, that's a backhanded compliment.
Yeah. So, but Judah wasn't the source of this. It was, he was actually the one who kind of saved Joseph. So, I mean, still wasn't great, but he was better than some of the other brothers. So you can make the argument he should have been, but let's finish up.
When Joseph was informed of the approach of his father, he rejoiced exceedingly, chiefly because his coming would stop the talk of the Egyptians, who were constantly referring to him as the slave that had dominion over them. Now, thought Joseph, they will see my father and my brethren, and they will be convinced that I am a freeborn man of noble stock.
So all this time, Joseph is still worried. I mean, he's in charge of Egypt, but he still wants the Egyptians to know, yeah, I'm not a slave. I never was a slave. I should have never been a slave. This is still an issue to him. He wants them to know, hey, here's my dad. And my dad's going to prove that I was never a slave. I was never supposed to be a slave. Yep.
In his joy and anticipation of seeing his father, Joseph made ready his chariot with his own hands, without waiting for his servants to minister to him. And this loving action rebounded later to the benefit of the Israelites, for it rendered of none effect Pharaoh's zeal in making ready his chariot himself with his own hands to pursue after the Israelites.
So the fact that we read about Joseph going out to meet his father, that is in the Torah. The Torah actually says specifically, and that's what we'll pick up next week, that Joseph was so excited to see his dad. It says right here. And it says, by the way, Jacob had sent Judah ahead of him to point the way before him to Goshen. It came to the land of Goshen, which is the area that the sons live in. And of course, what does it tell us? Pointing the way before him is not just establishing a place for them, but setting up Jewish schools. You have to set up a Jewish school. It's the first thing you have to do when you come to a new city. A Jewish school comes first. Jewish cemeteries and Jewish schools comes first. So they had to establish a Beit Midrash so that they could start teaching and educating the next generation. And then it says, Joseph ordered his chariot and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. And we'll read what the rabbis have to say about that meeting after many, many years, what it felt like for Joseph and what it felt like for Jacob to come back together and to reunite. Again, never knowing whether they ever see each other again is very real. It's a very real part of this story. And that is what we're going to be reading, and that's where we'll pick up next week. in the meantime, again, we're going to hope and pray that everybody stays healthy and takes care of themselves and takes care of their families. And we should all know that we have great examples. Why am I doing this on here right now? It's not the way it should look. I'm trying to annotate and make sure that we know this is where we left off. But I'm doing it in a very weird way right now. I'm not doing it the right way. I'm all over the place, folks. Going crazy. I'm going crazy with pens. Anyways, it was great to have the Schwartzes back with us. We're glad you're here to, and by the way, I had no idea, by the way, I didn't know for sure you'd be here today anyways, but that we'd read this wonderful story of a family of grandparents that wanted to be with their family. That's a great story, very appropriate story. And also, again, as we said, for Diane Gilden as well, for us to have that story of grandparents who want to be with their families more than anything else. And we have a great-grandfather, we have Judith's father who's with us as well. Is he still there? Is he still with us?
He just raised his hand.
All right, good. So
no,
that's
you know on the thing.
Well, that's a guy who gets to travel in his 90s, is still traveling all around the country to be there. And again,
well, he was.
while we really miss, yes, it's true. He hasn't in the last few days, but we hope that he will be back to his travels. He's doing it virtually now. And again, as much as we miss Diane and the Schwartzes and the different people who've moved out of the area, it's nice when they come back to be with family, like Mike and Mary Schwartz, who came back to also be near their family. So sometimes people move to our area to be with their families, which a lot of people have. I'm sure we have some other people on the line right now who moved to Santa Clarita to be with grandchildren. And then we also, unfortunately, lose people who want to be with their family. But we can never be completely, well, we're not sad at all when people do. We're sad for not seeing the people as much, but we also always understand why people want to be by their families. And that is a very important Jewish tradition from our patriarchs and matriarchs. So thank you, everybody, for being there. And again, we'll see you either tomorrow night for a Torah study or Friday night service or some other cool thing. I don't know what I don't think we have anything else this Sunday. We have our first day of Sunday school or religious school. We're not really calling it Sunday school anymore, but our first day of our program is this Sunday. But
evolutionary learning.
Evolutionary. All right. But as you can see from our Midrash, it's a big part of who we are as Jews, making sure we get that Beit Midrash set up in the next town, whether it's the next city or it's the next reality, whether it's virtually or whether it's in whatever next planet we live on. We'll make sure the Beit Midrash is there quick. All right, everybody, stay healthy and stay safe.
How do you recognize a raised hand?
I don't know.
You go.
Is that a joke?
No. My father hit the raise hand button, and I don't know how you.
It's because I got 25 different things going on. And by the way, we never were able. I was having a little. I don't know why this was. I could never get this on Facebook today. My wife was in her car. She wanted to listen. She wanted to listen to the Facebook on her way up north today. She's driving up north to one of the nursing homes that she visits. She's going up there now. She's getting her tests every 2 weeks, and she's going up north now.
Is she coming to San Jose?
She is going to San Francisco. She's opening up this week and next week, or this week and the week after. The Jewish Home of San Francisco is now under her authority. But in that business now, because they may get back the Jewish home in Palo Alto again, which was taken over. Originally, she had that. You remember she had the JCC facility there in the beautiful one they have in Palo Alto. But then it got taken over by the Jewish Home of San Francisco. And now since the Jewish Home of San Francisco is now her account, she might wind up getting it back and going back to Palo Alto. So I will let you know.
Marson needs to go back to Abramson.
Okay, well, yeah, well, if she gets her way, she'll have that account too. Take over all kosher business for her company, so we're hoping that happens. But we never got Facebook on, so I can't apologize to anybody on Facebook because you're not watching. but I don't know why. It said unable to stream video on Facebook Live. So maybe next week. Take care, everybody. Let's see you.
All right.
See you soon.
And have a great Chodesh. If I don't see you before, the new month, when we enter the new month of Elul, the month where we start to really start thinking about the new year, which starts on Friday or Thursday night and Friday. So Chodesh Tov as well. We can start wishing people. Take care. Bye-bye.